He who has a why can bear almost any how. If you've established your why, what are you building and why? That should be something that you pin on your wall or your bathroom mirror and to remind yourself every day, because there's gonna be a lot of really hard days and they always come in a row.
For many men, the end of a relationship doesn't just break the heart, it breaks the bank. Assets split, homes lost, retirement plans disrupted. But beneath the financial fallout lies something deeper, a quiet grief, a shaken identity, and the haunting question, who am I now? Welcome to the Glen Gilbert Connection, where we discuss relationship wisdom for the seasoned man and woman. I am your host, Glen Gilbert. Today, we are going to shift our focus slightly and cover the financial struggles men face when dealing with a broken relationship. Joining us once again is Jordan, a first vice president and financial advisor at Global Wealth Management firm. Jordan is also a retired Marine Corps major, was a company commander of 225 Marines, and who executed a 2013 combat deployment to Afghanistan. Jordan is here to talk about what it really takes to rebuild not just your portfolio, but your sense of self-worth. Because when the money goes, the shame often follows, and too many men suffer in silence. This episode is for the man staring at the spreadsheet and the ceiling at 2 a.m., wondering how to start over. You're not alone, and you're not done. Jordan, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your time.
Hey, happy to be here.
So please tell us a little more about your history, your military service, and your decisions to enter the financial industry.
A long and winding road. I guess to take it way back, originally from Tacoma, Washington, raised by two great parents. I had a younger brother. Pretty much Catholic school, all the way kindergarten through senior year of high school. The majority of my extracurriculars during that time was oddly working on a dairy farm around dairy cattle 4-H. While I felt very blessed to, be educated by a bunch of nuns and priests who were just consummate professionals. It really impacted my development in the long term. I also got a little bit of the flip side of the coin when I would go to work at the dairy farm, either in the evenings or the weekends, because the staff there didn't care about me at all. I mean, they did, but, as a hired hand, but it was, I was effectively a cog in a very live organism, the farm as a whole. So it was just, I was a little bit of fodder, but went to a Jesuit college prep school. I ended up going to Central Washington University, but my parents didn't have any money to send me to college. So I started and ran a house painting business, mostly exterior house painting, to pay for college. So my nights and weekends were not your typical college student's experience. And I was taking a full course load the entire time, but I did graduate with debt still, tis the sign of the times, but it was nowhere near as much debt if I'd have just been taking out loans the entire time. So I did consider that a win. Got my degree in business administration, worked for my dad for a time. He was a retired financial advisor. Had to endure the 08, 09 financial crisis with him. That was brutal. Mm-hmm. He had to cut back. Frankly, he didn't have the overhead to pay me as a full-time employee. So switched gears. I knew I wanted to do the next hardest possible thing I could find, which is become an officer in the Marine Corps. So joined the Marine Corps, just a brutal training pipeline, but again, very, very significant in my development. And I spent about a year and 9 months in the training pipeline between officer candidate school to the basic school to combat engineer officers course, and about 2 months. So I dropped to the Marine Corps Reserves actually after I was done with the training pipeline, and not 2 months later did I get a call, hey, you're going to Afghanistan. I said, rock on, let's go. That was sort of the point, I guess. Right. So did the 2013, 2014 combat tour, got back to my then soon-to-be fiance. I proposed to her a couple of months after I got home. Mm-hmm. We got married a couple months later on a sailboat in the middle of Lake Union in downtown Seattle. It was the cheapest venue we could find, $500 for 3.5 hours. So that worked out. Then after that, shortly after getting back stateside, I joined my firm and built my practice, and the rest is history. So I am these days as you mentioned, a first vice president, portfolio management director. It's a pretty significant title internally because I'm permitted to build customized stock bond portfolios. Most advisors can't do that. That's a lot of liability for a firm. So that's my role, and I am a certified financial planner as well. It's a special designation called a CFP that you can get. So typically one of the more recognizable ones in my line of work. So that's the long version of my background.
It's very impressive, Jordan.
Hmm.
What are the the most common financial mistakes men make immediately after a breakup or divorce, would you say?
I think we all have seen or known someone who fits the stereotype, right? Where they go out and buy a sports car, or I've oddly seen a lot of brand new wardrobe overhauls for the men that care to do it or fashionably inclined, and that usually results in some pretty loud outfits. I've noticed, like a lot of paisley shirts and very loud style. Think Ed Hardy or Dave Donahue or something that, identifies with the young, on their second stint into the dating world. For some guys, it's the way to make a new start. So I don't know if I'd necessarily call it a mistake. To me, you're stepping into the realm of mistakes when you are somehow undercutting your wealth building infrastructure, right? There is a very systematized, and I have to tread carefully, right? I don't want anybody taking anything I give as financial advice gospel, right? Everybody's situation is very, very different. Do not take anything I say today as, I'm going to go do this and everything's going to work out great, right? I don't need an attorney's letter informing me of a lawsuit in the mail anytime soon. But speaking in generalities, I think that people, when they undercut their ability to positively grow their net worth over a long period of time, that's when you're officially making a mistake. So if you're fresh out of a relationship and your heart is aching and you think, man, I need a Corvette, brand new Corvette, which are sick, by the way. I need a brand new Corvette to really get me back in the dating pool. And you cash out your 401k to buy that Corvette. That's really stupid. That's a mistake. I wouldn't do that. If you can't afford a Corvette right now, you need to have the fortitude as a man to look yourself in the mirror and say, you know what, that's probably not a good long-term decision. It's probably going to undercut my success and certainly my dating viability in the long term. So I could go down a number of what ifs or hypotheticals, but I think that answers mostly the entirety of that question. I think spur of the moment purchases that are not well thought out in a man's longer term life strategy is where you're officially making a mistake. And this is not the first time I've mentioned this concept on the show before. A man, for me, should have his own vision, his own life's mission, his own strategy to realize that vision and mission. Because when you're a man who has sat down and done the hard work, like the serious thinking and the journaling and maybe bouncing some of your ideas off of some friends or trusted friends or colleagues or whatever, that really is the hard work. Putting pen to paper, forming what you believe is a vision or a mission for you. And it's not going to be perfect the first time you do it. That's why a lot of guys don't try. They want the perfect, exactly what they should be doing. No one's going to have it perfectly. But if you have the guts to put down what I call the 80% solution, something that you think is pretty damn close to what you want to spend your days and your conscious effort pursuing, when you have that in mind, it's going to attract people to you, friends, potential mates. A guy who's thought it out and has an end state in mind, has taken the time and the effort to formulate what that looks like, at least identify a few key steps that will get him there, or at least closer. That's an attractive thing. You start to build out an aura where people are like, oh man, this guy's working towards something. He's on a mission. Like, and I do believe people are drawn to that. So to really wrap up my soapbox diatribe, there. Of course, there are a lot of common financial mistakes that men make when they're in emotional distress. That's certainly a common thing. But when you undercut your ability, when you make a decision regarding your finances that damages the pursuit of that long-term goal or vision, that's when you've officially made a mistake.
I really like how you were saying it. Basically, I summarize what you're suggesting as, guys, find a purpose when you get out of a long-term, and yeah, let me know if I'm going down the wrong path here, but I always like to suggest, once getting out of a long-term relationship, find your purpose. And I used to say, I'm going to go there. I used to say to follow Admiral McCraven's suggestion
Always.
of make your bed. Do the first thing in the make your bed. If you want to change the world, start by making your bed. I want to add my own twist to that is also, if you're getting out of a long-term relationship, you're over 40 or 45, get your testosterone levels checked, because I'm guessing those probably will be pretty low. Go to a healthcare professional would be my suggestion. Have that discussion as well. So make your bed, make some appointments at the doc, start eating better, start working out, start doing a lot of stuff and then figure out that purpose.
And I would dovetail anecdotally on your recommendation. And I am not a doctor, so don't listen to a thing I say. However, from my experience, I have found that the new in vogue, the new popular diagnosis is low testosterone. I'm sure you have low testosterone. I know I've been diagnosed with low testosterone. My dog, my houseplant, actually has low testosterone. So I'm sorry. I just, there's a lot of testosterone replacement therapies out there. What you don't often hear is when you engage in a supplement like that, guess what? Your body now needs that. And that is now something you are not necessarily addicted to, but you are certainly reliant upon it. Right. So I would just encourage your very thoughtful and intelligent audience, before signing up for a prescription right away, start with the basics. Start with a little bit more protein in your diet, lifting things that are heavy and putting them back down again in the weight room responsibly. Follow a well-designed exercise program, but lift some weights for God's sake. Do it somewhat consistently, 2-3 days a week for a couple of months. Take a blood test before and a blood test after to measure your results, because in this highly overprescribed society that we live in today, do yourself a favor and stay out of the prescription pipeline as long as you can. Odds are you'll probably get there someday, because God knows we all have high cholesterol or high blood pressure at some point. But just do your damnedest to do some of the hard work first, because I'm here to tell you, not only is that going to solve your certainly help your low T levels, but you can do a hell of a lot for your self-esteem too. It's going to fix a lot of things at the same time, to the point where you may not need a prescription. So that's a passionate subject of mine. If you have
Yeah. No, I would say that's why I recommend going to a healthcare professional who knows what they're doing. Don't just initiate this on your own. Don't think you have all the answers. Talk to a healthcare professional. Talk to someone who can give you some feedback. Get your levels checked. Talk to that person about that and make a decision an informed decision with licensed healthcare professionals that are experts in this field. It's not a very common thing. That's why you hear a lot of other stuff out there about guys using testosterone on their own or taking testosterone on their own, and it gets basically it's not taken appropriately,
right?
And that's where things get messed up, and you're not taking maybe other things to help
balance,
like
that.
Estrogen yes, absolutely, to balance everything out. You need, if you're testosterone, you're having some side effects, you need to take estrogen blockers or something like that. There's ways to look at it and do it appropriately with the help and care of a healthcare professional on board, but they need to know what they're doing as well.
Right.
So, but
continue.
yeah. Studies show men often avoid financial risks after emotional upheaval. So how do you help these clients balance caution with opportunity?
Well, I can already tell I'm going to be a broken record today, right? And there's no shame in a consistent message. That's what I firmly believe in. Um, when you're balancing caution with opportunity, it needs to be done within the context, ideally, of a holistically designed financial plan, but at the very least, in line with your strategic vision, right? Like you want to start a business. You know, you got to write a business plan, and you're going to rent out some, store space, and you're going to order your inventory, and then you're going to put it up for sale. You know, if you're going to use your funds to order the inventory, what the hell good is a new sports car purchase going to do for you right now? Maybe you save that as a goal for your first successful year in business or turning a profit or whatever. But if it doesn't fit into your longer term strategic vision, then what are we doing right now? Are we a child? Are we an immature young man who just doesn't quite have it all together? That's characteristic of a young kid full of piss and vinegar, that's living for today and not thinking down the road. It is. And don't get me wrong, I've made stupid financial decisions myself. I mean, I've certainly learned the hard way in some instances, but I was able to identify, oops, this isn't going to take me closer to what I want. Right. Sometimes it's not reversible. Sometimes it is. So, whatever correction needs to occur, reassess your priorities. And if there is an opportunity, and I would be very wary oftentimes. I have clients in my own practice. A friend of mine approached me about this investment opportunity and this thing that he's buying or that thing that he's buying or he's building there's a lot of private friends, family investment opportunities. The biggest issue I tend to find with those is just the liquidity. If you give your friend a couple $100,000 to start up his business and all of a sudden, you need it back because of some urgency in your own life, good luck. Like, I don't think you're going to get it back. And there's a lot of instances to the contrary, but many more so I've seen that when you are loaning money even to friends or family, sometimes it doesn't come back. So I think there is a lot of opportunity in the world today. I would make it as calculated and vetted as humanly possible. And I would act like you're not going to get it back. And is that going to sink your strategic plan? No? Well, good. Then you can afford the risk of that opportunity. But if it does work out, it's going to push you that much farther along your strategic plan.
Right. No, I think it's great. And kind of to echo what you were saying earlier about redundancy is locating that purpose. Understanding the risk is really important when you're trying to discover that purpose. And if you're in a place of vulnerability, it should be used with, going forward with caution. The breakup causes a whole lot of, what do I want to say, destruction? I don't know, of one's ego, self-worth.
I think destruction's a perfectly appropriate word.
Yeah, and to see an opportunity come along, you're like, oh my gosh, this will bring me back to the top. But
well, maybe you're not in the best place to, and I think it takes a courageous man to admit to himself, maybe I'm not in the best mind space to accurately assess if I can handle taking this risk on or this opportunity on right now. Very rarely are the opportunities that are put in front of you, rarely is it the lottery ticket that's going to catapult you to millionaires or billionaires club. Very, very rarely. There will always be another opportunity. I would treat it like you're a baseball player at the plate, right? Let the bad pitches go by. You don't need to hit every single one of them. Matter of fact, the odds are very much in your favor that you're avoiding disaster if you let it go by.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's why it's like, focus on a purpose. Focus on yourself right now, because
that's the most important thing.
Yeah, guys get in a very, and just suggestions again, but because guys get in a very vulnerable position after a divorce, and we're not feeling very good about ourselves. It's the reasons as to why you really want to focus on yourself rather than these external opportunities that you may not be so sure about. That's why it's great to have working on your social circle, your close friend network. Who's your tightest friends? They could give you feedback like, dude, you know.
I would even say, like, and I mean this very superficially in the best sense.
Mhm.
Who are your friends that are living a life that you would like to live? Who are the successful cases, right? Because I have found in certain courses of life that there are folks that are making all of the mistakes, doing all of the habits that I don't want to have in my life, who have an abundance of advice for me on how I should live my life. And I don't take their advice very seriously. And to be honest, I don't even listen to it that
I'm
long.
I'm just picturing how you'd be like, uh-huh, sure.
Well, it's
Just how's that
and every guy has a valuable perspective sometimes. I would say every guy has a perspective, and I think there are a lot of armchair quarterbacks to life. It goes back to the man in the arena speech, right? It's very very easy for someone to be in the stands and, oh, you should do it this way or that way and that way. It's like, well, are they going to be the ones, getting up in the morning to cold call for new clients for your new business? No. Like, well, what do they know?
Right.
Is there anyone in your life that has done the hard work, is living the results of their hard work, where you could potentially glean an example or a lesson or two? I have had countless very successful, very hardworking men and women in my life where I go, you look like you've done something right. Can you just tell me a little about your background and how you got to where you are? Like, what did you do?
Right.
And I can tell you with a high degree of certainty, most of the time, those people that have grinded and suffered and sacrificed to get to the level of success that they are at, they are not only flattered at the question, you're not imposing on their time. Not only are they flattered, but it gives them a very real sense of fulfillment. If they can take some of their lessons that they learned the hard way and reduce someone else's suffering. If they can pass these hard-earned lessons to someone else, maybe you, that doesn't have to learn it the hard way, and then they get to watch your success ongoing, that's going to be one of the most rewarding experiences in their whole life. So you certainly shouldn't be shy about approaching trusted friends, colleagues, or whatever that you view are successful and maybe may have a valuable lesson or two to impart. But so not only shouldn't you be shy, but to whom much is given, much is expected. You're probably not going to pay for that advice. So because you're being given that at a pretty well bargained price, you should consider it your responsibility to do something with it. Build something, move yourself further along towards a strategic goal. And to be honest with you, tell your mentor or the person that gave you that advice, keep them updated. Like if you've applied some of those lessons or have just been grinding it away and have been gradually building, you could say, hey, that advice really helped kind of push me through some of the harder times. But my revenue is up 10% from the last year. And I guarantee you, they will share and celebrate every single tiny and large success you have, because now they're accessory to your success.
The appreciation being shown is I think a world of wealth there to receive that information and say, yep, I'm starting to build up my wealth and I'm doing great. And to go back to that person that gave you that information to say, yeah, I'm doing really well, is a way of showing appreciation to them. And they will in turn probably show appreciation back. I love it. I always look at something like that as if you find somebody whose lifestyle you want to emulate, reverse engineer how they got there. Start figuring out what they did. Start from the very beginning. And if you can get a hold of that person and pick their ear or pick their brain rather, pick their ear, and then pick their ear, yeah, and just start figuring out, how did you do this? And I really want to start. And if you give them updates, They probably get a lot of people going, how did you do this? And these people that are asking the question never execute. They want to see who's executing, who's willing to put the hard work in, because I know I sure did. And it's really nice to see somebody else that's having such, the same amount of commitment, sacrifice, and, willing to do the same kind of hard work as well.
Well, and furthermore, too, I think you start to open them up as a source, as a networking source, right? Because when they see you actually applying your advice
right.
to success and creating something of worth or something of value, they might say, hey, I know a guy who needs what you're selling, or I got a guy who might be able to help you with this or that. And oh my gosh, you needed some help with that. When you show that you're a man who is committed and a man of action and who isn't afraid to do the hard work. 99% of the men are terrified to do the hard work.
Right.
And they don't do it. And they settle for something else. There's a quote that says something like 90% of men live lives of quiet desperation because a lot of them were too scared to take the bold move or make the hard work. It is what it is. So if you have a mentor or a confidant who has given you valuable advice and you keep them updated, I think they're going to be doing cartwheels and they're going to think to themselves, how else could I help this guy out? And maybe that it turns into opening their network to you as well. So,
and you can't do it alone. If you're looking to move up, if you're looking to level up yourself, it's really, really, it's not impossible, but it makes it really, really hard to try and do it alone.
Yeah. No, if there is as a matter of fact, if there's any book I could recommend, to you for readers and yourself, it would be called The Go-Giver by Bob Burg and John David Mann, which is about a young man who is grinding to build something. And he thinks it's all about the networking. It's all about how can I get something out of this person? How can I get something out of this person? And long synopsis made short, he has a mentor, an incredibly successful corner office, guy at his office. And all that guy does is just kick back, reclined all day. He talks to a couple friends, clients on the phone, and then leaves early. And he goes, how in the world can that guy be a corner office, successful case where when I'm over here grinding? Well, this guy, it became less about what can I get? It's like, how can I help you? How can I help? Like, what are you looking for to build your business or your strategy? What do you need? Because I know people, I'm good at things like, how could I contribute to your success? And that philosophy, hence the title, The Go-Giver, it becomes, the character gives to a couple people and it doesn't really turn out to much. They go off and take advantage of it and do their own thing, but he gives to someone else who then returns the favor in a big way. And then he gives to a couple other people who return the favor in smaller ways, but really well-timed small ways that help him out. And all of a sudden he's got this mega success and he's got all these people that want to help him. So it really, there's a foreword written that talks about how this philosophy has taken off in corporate America and small business America, and how so many people are completely shifting the way they do business. And that great book, I think anybody who is on the precipice of beginning the grind or beginning to build something or have just formed their strategic plan for their life and are now looking for maybe a little extra momentum or inspiration to get it moving, buy the book.
What's the name of the book again?
It's called The Go-Giver by, toss it aside. So it's called The Go-Giver, a little story about a powerful business idea by Bob Burg and John David Mann. So highly recommend it. If
I would add to that list of books, that first book, I would also add, I had to look this up, the author, but The 4-Hour Workweek by Timothy Ferriss talks about.
Tim Ferriss is a legend. Yeah, I've not read that though. Shame on me.
Yeah, it's the same kind of thing of what you just described, how the guy is in the corner office, works just a little bit during the day and is able to take off because he's able to make his work day so efficient. It doesn't take that long anymore. It's a really great book to, like, if you're starting off and you're trying to figure out the best way to, organize your new business or your new, purpose. Right. I think both these books are like a great way to start off. Yeah.
Yeah. Good way to help light the fire.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So how does the provider identity impact a man's financial decision post separation?
It's an interesting question. I mean, I'm just reflecting on my own
Mhm.
personal breakups. I would imagine most men's provider identity is lying in pieces on the floor, if it's a particularly heart-wrenching breakup. So I almost feel as if that's set aside, it's put on the shelf for a while, because I believe the provider identity manifests itself after prerequisites are already established. And what does that mean in simpler language? You need to have a strategic vision for your life, and then you will probably attract a mate. And you'll probably work your way through several different mates until you find one that is truly suitable and a smart match. And then there comes the provider mentality, because now you have a mate to support and provide for. And maybe you get to the next level of self actualization as a man, you become a father, and now you've got a small family unit or a large family unit to now provide for, and your identity as a provider is therefore established. So, we're all in different phases of our life, and breakups hit different people at different times. You may be a provider already, for young kids or even any age kids under the age of 18. You may already be a provider in the midst of a breakup. And I think that is particularly difficult as a child of divorce, to repair your heart, reestablish your momentum towards a strategic vision or purpose, while maintaining that, role model provider identity. You will fall short. You will fall short. You will make mistakes. You'll yell at your kids when you're not supposed to. You won't give them the time and attention when you absolutely should, because you're juggling a lot of things. And at the end of the day, you're only human. And so you're going to have to, allow yourself a lot of grace, in my opinion. You're going to have to allow for the mistakes to be made. You should always keep the priorities in mind. What's the top priority, the second, the third, the fourth. An example for me personally is, my wife and my daughter are always first priority. If there is a business meeting and my daughter has a coach pitch softball game, I'm going to the game. I can always reschedule the meeting. And there's always the big opportunities that come down the pipe. The big opportunities worth winning are the ones that we'll understand, at least the ones that I want to work with. So having your priorities well thought out and decided upon, I think, as a man is very important. But you tug at a string that goes down a very deep rabbit hole in terms of the provider identity. It's just there's certain prerequisites, I think, for a man to have in place to be a successful provider.
Mhm.
So.
Yeah, I think there's, you kind of touched on something I was just thinking about, and it's accountability, and maybe even starting to set up boundaries. This time of recovery is a time to be like, okay, what should I be doing for myself, and what should I not, or what will I not do for myself? Again,
Right.
I think bringing children into the fold of these kinds of things after a relationship is ended is going to make decision making just so much more challenging, just because you have to think about other lives. Mm-hmm. And you may not be able to necessarily think 100% about yourself. It's like, well, what can I do for them that might be helpful as well? Yeah. And that's going to make it even more challenging.
Some of the men I think I've admired the most throughout my life, my dad is certainly one of them, is one who, in the midst of emotional distress or heartbreak or what have you, they soldier on. They compartmentalize that grief in their head, and for the moment, they do the job that needs to be done. They provide for the kids, they provide for the wife or whatever at the moment. They do their provider identity, but they deal with the grief later. However, I think the most common symptom is the man that doesn't deal with it later. He doesn't do that hard work. He doesn't feel the feelings that are gut wrenching. Feelings of regret, shame, major setbacks on the road of life, just sitting with those emotions that just tear you apart. And then it manifests later in the form of drug, alcohol abuse, philandering, any number of mistakes are manifested because that's baggage that's still being carried. And in my view, I think when you don't acknowledge those feelings and suffer through those feelings, which is some of the hardest work I think we as human beings ever do, then it's going to lead to more problems.
Agreed.
Most definitely.
Agreed. That's why a men's group is really important. It's not just, or maybe a really good therapist or what needs to be done, but just having, I think, a men's group around you to vent something like this out would be extremely helpful. Just because the guys are going to know what you're going through. They understand the responsibilities, the accountability, the role as a provider to an intimate detail. I mean, all of those things are all relatable to say a men's group or a few really close guy friends that can be like, yep, I know what it's like to, have this provider role and then have everything kind of shattered around me.
Sure. And in other cases too, a therapist is a big help. I think a lot of men these days lack for a community of other men that they truly bond with and truly have connection with. I'm beyond blessed to say I've had several. So I know that I have a group of guys I could reach out to vent to, and it wouldn't be a problem. But I know a lot of guys don't have that. It is very worth it to take the time to intentionally build that and just simply start with the activities you like to do or something you maybe always wanted to try. Be advised it takes time to build that community. If you come into day one to a kickboxing gym and start telling everybody about your breakup, probably not going to be well received. You should definitely build the foundation of basic friendships. And when it gets to the point where you come through the door and, hey man, how's it going? It's been a little bit better. I'm just happy to be here. Well, what do you mean by it's a little bit better? What's going on? Tell me about it. You want to get you want to get a protein shake after this and talk about it? Yeah, I kind of do actually. You got the time? Yeah? Awesome. So it's everything in its proper order.
Right. Time and place.
Yeah.
Time and place.
There's been I've had plenty of occasions where I would come into a jiu-jitsu academy that I would train at for years. And, a new guy would come in. I could tell he was starved for real connection.
Yes. Real
friends. Because I would finish introducing myself and giving him my name, and I would get his life story. And we've all been in that kind of situation before, and it's awkward, and you kind of smile and nod. You don't want to break this guy's spirits, but over time you give gradual corrections. And this particular guy I'm still friends with to this day because he had a lot going on and he was looking for a community and he did the exact right thing. And he went out and he built one. Good. But he definitely at the moment was very starved for connection. And I was a listening ear that day to be polite, but times after that, he would begin to emotion dump. And I'd say, hey man, like we're getting ready to train. So we'll talk a bit more a little bit later, man. We'll catch a beer this weekend and we can kind of talk through it. Like I hope things get better for you.
Yeah. Time and place. But it's always good to get that time and place set. Don't blow it off. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. There's the soft commitment, and then there's like, hey, I'm around this Saturday afternoon. I don't got a lot going on. You want to come over and cook some burgers? Yeah.
Right. Kind of this rolls into my next question. What role does shame play in the financial secrecy, like hiding debt or avoiding financial conversations?
Could you expand upon that a little bit more?
I'm thinking about if a man is to the point of maybe like going through a breakup or after the divorce has occurred, where it's maybe he's not taking accountability for maybe some debts, maybe some ringing stuff up, because I was trying to provide a certain sense of lifestyle for her. I was really committed. I was really trying to do this, and it just blew up in my face. And now I am in a whole lot of debt. I haven't really told anybody about how much debt I am. I have these 20 credit cards that are maxed to the hilt. I haven't told anybody but you about them. I don't know what to do. I'm scared about the future. I mean, even to say I'm scared about the future.
I'd encourage him to go buy Dave Ramsey's book, The Total Money Makeover, and start there. Truth be told, I know I've encountered several positive or prospective clients, and just folks who are candid with me about their financial situation, given my line of work, and I think shame is a powerful motivator, right? Like if we've made some pretty stupid decisions and need to course correct, whatever it takes to get you moving, man. If it's shame, fine. If it's, motivation, fine. Like whatever it's going to be to identify your strategic vision and at least a near-term course of action to ameliorate that debt. Or, if you've invested in an investment that is now a total loss, okay, how do we, first of all, realize some decent tax write-offs for it? But secondly, how do we continue to press on and build the vision that we've established for ourselves? The studies are countless where, how does the quote go? He who has a why can bear almost any how. If you've established your why, what are you building and why? That should be something that you pin on your wall or your bathroom mirror, and to remind yourself every day, because there's gonna be a lot of really hard days, and they always come in a row, right? It's when it rains, it pours. So if there's something that you can do to remind yourself of the light at the end of the tunnel, sure, there'll be some shame in mistakes made. I still have shame for mistakes I've made. I think we all do. Nobody is completely beyond reproach. But if you can turn that into some constructive action, I think you'll find yourself weathering this winter in your life, and you will rapidly approach the green shoots of spring as your hard work starts to manifest, right? You pay off one of those debts, and now you have just one less, on your balance sheet that you have to deal with. Right. Or you make one big sale that, is going to give you a few more weeks of funding in your business. It's the night is darkest just before the dawn, because I've not used enough idioms in this podcast episode already. It just naturally comes to my mind. I won't lie. It's gonna be really hard, and I personally believe that there's always at least one point, typically many, in a man's life where you get to the point where you're so beaten down and so at the bottom of rock bottom, the only last thing to rely on is your own wellspring of motivation or grit. And anything that can help light that fire just a little bit brighter to get you through, in my view, is an asset and should be leveraged. So I don't know if that answers that question at all.
I think it does.
Okay, good.
Because what I'm starting to think about, what you're saying, and please correct me if I'm wrong, it's like if you go to the doctor and you're like, this aches and pains that I have in my back, it's let me rephrase this. When you go to the doctor, you should be upfront with everything that's going on, no matter how much you might be ashamed. When you're going to your lawyer going through, say, the divorce courts, you want to be upfront with everything you do, because they need to know about it so they can help you.
Yeah. If you want an accurate diagnosis, yeah.
Right. When you go to the doctor, you want to be upfront with everything so they can give you an accurate diagnosis. When you're going to your divorce lawyer, you want to be upfront with everything you've done so they can adequately defend you. When you go to your financial advisor, you want to be absolutely upfront with everything you've done so they can help you the best they can. Knowledge is going to be helpful. A major part of dealing with that shame or embarrassment is going to be accountability. It's going to make things so much more easier in the long run. You just got to be able to, yep, I did this. How can we help? What can we do to overcome it now? Type of thing.
And you touch on a very key term that I personally try to just continue to instill in my own life, which is accountability. I think in this day and age, it's the world, or certainly the society, here in the United States, most of the time is very quick to absolve you of responsibility of any kind. It was this thing or another thing that unduly influenced you, and it's not really your fault. One of the most breakthrough concepts that was ever introduced to me by a mentor in college was something called the onus of control. You can either decide to have an internal locus of control where I control everything, or at least to some degree have influence over most things, or you can decide on an external locus of control. I'm sort of subject to the whims of fate. I can try as hard as I want, but sometimes it's just, I can't, I don't ultimately have the final say in my own life. I'm a slave to my passions, to my addictions, to my poor judgment sometimes. And that was that was a literal lightning bolt in my life. I said, I'm going to be an internal locus of control guy or locus of control guy. That way I know that I can, be in control of everything. And there was a serious span of time where bad things would happen in life, as they always do. Stuff that we can't control, stuff that's not our fault. I think in truth, there's a healthy mix between both of those. And I would blame it on myself. And I would, it's that Catholic guilt, baby. It's a powerful motivator. So I would go, oh, this is all your fault. You should have foreseen this coming. You should have been better prepared for it. Shame on you. And I think I did cause myself a little bit of undue anguish and guilt. But it's still, I did the same thing I would always do, guilt or not, press on and continue to execute on my strategy of life. But I also found that through exercising that accountability, that personal accountability, I would make some better decisions. Like, I'm going to be on my friend Glenn's podcast the next day. Should I have this extra glass of scotch this evening? Maybe I should not. Perhaps I'll be a little too fuzzy-minded the next day and not as well prepared to share my thoughts. This sounds like a story I've heard before. So I just think that accountability thing is very important.
It is very important. I would agree. And it just helps to get through those tough times by just owning it. Owning up the things you did. There was the New York attorney. I'm forgetting his name right now. I'm really embarrassed. He had a story. He's a divorce attorney out of New York. And he's got a book out there. If you're in my office, it's already too late. And he has a story of where his client said a whole bunch of really horrendous things in text.
James Sexton.
Thank you. Oh, James is going to hate me. Like he really knows who I am anyway. James Sexton. Yeah. If you're in my office, if you're in my office, it's already too late. James Sexton has a story where his client was texting his spouse saying horrible things to her, like just nasty, bad things. So there's evidence out there of all of this junk that he was saying to her, and she was going to, obviously this is how bad of a guy he is. So James Sexton put this guy on the stand and said, let's go through it. And he's like, well, why don't you read off? He had his client read off some of the texts he sent to the ex, and he would read them off, and they were like horrible things. And like the guy was first like, you want me to read this? And he's like, yep, go ahead. And he's like, say it like that. And he's like, how do you feel about that? He's like, I was in this really bad place. I was very angry. I was really upset. I regret it now. Like basically he was apologizing and everything. But the whole point was he owned it. He took accountability for it. And James Sexton said the attorney for the ex like was taking sheets of depositions. He's like, nope. And he just like throwing them away. Like all this, the other side had all this stuff that they were going to use against his client, and they just threw it away because the guy took accountability for it. So there's really something to say. It's like, yep, I did whatever. I own up to it, and I'm moving forward. Going to your financial advisor to say, yep, I made some really bad choices. I dipped into my 401k a lot. I did, invested in a new Corvette when I shouldn't have. I was trying to impress and I took my wife out to London on first class and top notch, restaurants and four-star restaurants and taught me blah, blah, blah to try and get our relationship back together. And she still left me. You're like, how much of your savings did you? Well, like half of it, just owning it, own up to this stuff, take accountability and then go forward. It makes things it may be super hard at the time, but I think in the long run, it would help.
Yeah.
Just a suggestion.
Yeah. I think your thinking will be much more clearer as you continue on to the next phase, which is the rebuilding phase. Like if you try to just bury a lot of the accountability down and claim it wasn't your fault, I mean, I think that will remain heavy on your mind, at least in some degree.
Absolutely.
I think just I made some mistakes. How do I atone for that and continue to build on in a productive way? So,
yeah, I think about
there was a one question that you had sent to me ahead of time that really inspired a more enthusiastic story in response. So with your permission, I'll skip to, I think it's number 15.
Sure.
There was the question, a very good one. Can you share an anonymized story of a client who turned financial devastation into a legacy of strength? And if ever there was an inspirational story or a worthwhile comparison to be made, I do think this would be it. Mm-hmm. Certainly one of the wealthiest people I work for actually fled a Soviet-occupied country after their family's multi-generational farm was seized by the government. So they emigrated from that socialist nation, and they really, truly did arrive in America with a $20 bill, which was a lot of money at the time. They had $20. This is obviously well before 2025. So they consider themselves over the top privileged landing in America. Mm-hmm. And they had a lot of help from the Catholic Church, just sort of getting things settled, and they bounced around from place to place. But eventually it was a husband and wife team. The wife worked as an elevator operator. And the man did a brief stint in the army, and then came back and took classes at a local university to become an electrical engineer. And they built a very, very successful engineering business. And their net worth is well over 8 figures. But they literally had what you would call financial devastation. They had the equivalent of, I think $150 in your pocket and nothing more, and the clothes on your back. They had that too. So we all have setbacks in life and feel like we've hit rock bottom at times, and maybe there's some folks listening that have situations worse than that. But I'd reckon the majority of folks listening to this haven't had it that bad, where all you have to your name is your clothes on your back and maybe $100 in your pocket, and go forth from there and do great things. What I think is so fascinating about that particular story is motivation was not their question. Survival was their question. Their onus to move forward was driven down from the instinctual survival level. There was no choice. They didn't have to work up the gumption to, go out the next day. They were concerned about where the next meal was going to come from. So I know that sort of work ethic and desperation inculcates a very, very intense work ethic, because the fear is always, am I going to return to that? And do I have to subsist at that level again? I don't know if I'll be able to make it at this stage of the game at that level. So I don't mean to Shanghai your agenda.
No.
If that was one story that was very, very worth sharing. They are these days, they live their twilight years on the waterfront of the Puget Sound, where their pride and joy are their potted plants, flowers, apple trees, pears. A couple of them are actually rooted in the dirt, but they are avid gardeners. I mean, and they're in their early and mid 90s and doing all of this. So to watch what they've built, and more particularly from whence they came, the circumstances that they came from. Uh, we've all heard the stories about, so and so had it way worse than you.
Yep.
But I think those are valuable comparisons to be made when we're really wallowing in self-pity. Times are tough. Our heart is broken. That needs to be, respected. It's okay to be sad. But I think at times we could compare our situations to folks who really had it hard, possibly worse than us, and not only made it through, but thrived in the long term because of that hardship. They were forced to acclimate to the severe new circumstances and were really able to achieve something great. And I think everybody who's listening has that capacity in them.
Incredible inspiration. That would be a couple to go to and reverse engineer to go, how did you feel at the start of this when you had $20 in your hand, and what did you do to start going forward? Yeah. I mean, that is an absolutely amazing story to make it, not just make it, but make it to the point of where, less than 100th of the population in the US can make it to that point?
Yeah.
If that, I mean, just 0.0001% of the populace could make it.
Definitely less than 1%, for sure.
Oh, absolutely. 100%.
And I can tell you that, they're Eastern European, spoiler alert. And I can tell you, if you were to ask them that question, they would probably laugh in your face. How did you make it? How could you ever conceive, going on? And they'd be like, what are you talking about? They would almost be like, what kind of question even is that? It's I didn't have a choice. I had a newlywed bride, and we didn't know what we were going to eat that day. So I made it out, and I went out and I made it happen. And the wife, to her credit, shouldered a lot of the load as well. So I think that there's inspiration to be drawn from that, and I think that our capacity for suffering and overcoming suffering is so much greater than most of us realize. And if we were put in more severe circumstances, life-threatening, if you will, I think you'd be surprised how often times that your genetic evolution is going to start taking over, and you're going to get real motivated real quick to start surviving the situation. And then hopefully you can harness that energy further and turn it into thriving.
What do you think are some signs that a man's financial behavior is being driven by unresolved emotional trauma?
That's a good question too. I think we all have a baseline of behavior, right? I know that Glen Gilbert gets up every day, probably has a swig of water to get rehydrated, and then he puts on one of the snappiest outfits I've probably seen. Like that's his baseline existence, right? Nice, healthy breakfast. That's the way Glen Gilbert responsibly lives his life. If there's some sort of baseline of behavior, if Glen Gilbert came to me and he's like, "Oh, dude, check out this crazy, awesome, bright red Corvette I just bought," I'd go, "What? Like, this is not how you normally behave, Glenn. I mean, you're a little bit more calculated than that. What do you mean you just, pulled out of your 401k to buy a new sports car?" I think, I said it before, I think emotional baggage or trauma can manifest in some ways, whether it be substance abuse, whether it be ridiculous impulse buys that are completely out of sync with what your well thought out strategic vision for your life is. That to me is probably the most common and most obvious red flag behavior. I've had clients who I know had undergone some just breakups, for lack of a better term. And some of them were long time coming. Some of them were quite abrupt and unexpected. But What do you, this is a real conversation. What are you up to this weekend? Oh, I'm going down to Costa Rica for a peyote experience. And I'm like, really? Interesting. Are you?
Mm.
Aren't you the guy who's like, not had a drop of alcohol in however many years? And yeah, I'm going down there because I've heard, you can really discover some things about yourself. I'm like, hey, man, I'm not one to argue exploratory, experiences, but how much did you drop on this thing? And it's supposedly this guided trip, and the lodgings were all included, and the psychological tour guide was going to be present and stuff. I'm going, so what tour guide did what agency did you book this through? And of course he was very hesitant to give me the specifics and so forth, and I could tell he was looking for answers because he was in an emotional state, and I get that, but that was very, very outside of his normal range of behavior, certainly outside of his normal range of purchases. And I said, do you really want to, did you get trip insurance on that? Are you sure you really want to? I'm not, I'm not going to poo-poo psychedelic experiences, but do you want to spend this money right now when you've got tuition coming up for your teenage girl in a couple of months, and should we maybe let some of the dust settle first? Oh God, geez, you might be right about that. And I say, I'm all about new horizons and expanding your perspectives, but maybe all in its proper order, yeah. And so,
Yeah.
I think that I certainly think that there are manifestations of financial behavior going awry, and it's certainly driven by that. And the most common, I think, is deviations, from someone's normal spending pattern or saving pattern, and that's probably the most succinct answer. So,
Gotcha. How do you think emotional isolation affects financial recovery?
I mean, significantly. I think if you don't have that community, or at least a group of friends that you are able to reach out to and feel that human connection. We are social beings. If you keep yourself in isolation, you will deteriorate severely, both physically and mentally, and it will affect your judgment. And if you're on the road to financial recovery, that won't happen if you completely isolate yourself. Like it's just no. One of the requirements of the human person is social interaction. I think we've all met those people that deprive themselves of it. It's pretty obvious right away. And generally, you don't want to be around that person because they are very maladjusted. If that person is showing effort to become more adjusted, that's one thing. But if they are continuing those efforts to isolate themselves, which I think a lot of maladjusted people do, I don't know too many people that like to hang out around those types of folks. So to answer your question in short, how does emotional isolation affect financial recovery? I mean, if you're already on the road to emotional recovery, that's going to be your first priority anyway. And in order to do that, you need some sort of support system. And if you can't manage that, then forget financial recovery. That's probably not going to happen either. Right. So I think that I think a support system is pretty integral.
This is kind of a similar question we've talked about before, but for those, like, what advice would you give a guy who feels like he has failed not only financially, but within his relationship at the same time? Almost to the point of where I'm not doing anything right. I failed myself financially. I don't know how to do relationships. Maybe my job's in jeopardy. What advice would you give?
Well, I have a favorite example I point to. And I'm sure you've heard it. It's pretty common right now. Obviously, we've all failed, but one of my favorite stories, and this isn't even an exhaustive list, but one of my favorite presidents, Abraham Lincoln, back in the day, was renowned for his list of failures before he became president. He failed at being a business owner. He failed at being a lawyer. He was defeated in the Illinois state legislature in 1832, failed business owner in 1833, suffered a nervous breakdown in 1836. He was defeated for the Speaker of the House in 1838. He lost the nomination for Congress in 43 and in 1848. He was rejected for a land officer position in 49. He was defeated in a Senate race in 1854. He lost the nomination for VP in 1856. And then shortly thereafter became president, and managed to stitch back together the identity of the greatest nation on God's green earth during a time when, tensions were pretty damn high. So if he can manage through all of those failures and come back to achieve what is arguably one of the greatest achievements and most unlikely of achievements in a time much like today when societal divisions ran so deep, I think you hold a chance. I think there's a chance for you, as you put the pieces of your life back together after you've failed financially and relationally. It really, in my view, is just one foot in front of the other. One task, 1 minute, 1 hour at a time. You're not going to solve all the problems in front of you anytime soon, but you will make small material steps towards solving a small problem. Then you'll solve a bigger problem, and you'll solve a bigger problem. So I think just making peace with the fact that you may be in the valley of the bones right now, but you need to keep walking. You need to keep building back. And we've all been there, some to deeper degrees than others. But I don't think most of us have done it to the degree that Abraham Lincoln has. And I think that you should grant yourself just a little bit of faith to be able to just take the next step, make the one small improvement that you can control in the next few minutes or few hours or few days, and just build from there. And try to keep your focus as near term as possible and make the right decision as much as you can in the next few minutes, few hours, few days. Follow Admiral McCraven's most motivational speech and just make your bed after getting up. That's all you got to do. That is your only obligation for the day. Maybe tack on a shower if you can manage that, and a healthy meal. But if you can just manage some of the small basic things, you're going to build up your toughness to where you'll be able to manage more. And then you can build on that.
Yes. Perseverance. Perseverance.
Yeah, that's a bit of a rambling response. But I do like Abraham Lincoln's example, because I don't know how much you felt this in your formative years, maybe your 20s, 30s, but I personally failed a lot. Sure. And it was beyond humbling. It was discouraging. I would just go, man, maybe I'm just not cut out. Maybe I'm just not cut out. I don't think that I can be a success. Maybe I should just lower my sights. And for whatever reason, I would always feel, I would feel that way for a day or two. And then I would gradually get a little bit of my fire back and try to build from there. But I can even recall a handful of very disastrous instances when I, as a college student, was managing 4 crews of painters in a house painting business. I had a friend who was a painter at the time fall off a ladder, severely injure himself, had the ambulance out. There was talk of attorneys involved, and it was just one step at a time. Hey, I'm not going to solve all these things in one fell swoop, but I'm just going to try to resolve each item in its priority, right? The most important things I'm going to address first, make sure my friend's okay. He made a full recovery, by the way.
Good.
But I don't think that just because we've failed probably multiple times that's any cause to give up, because that's just part of life.
Right. Perseverance. I think Michael Jordan has a commercial on all the times he's failed, and then he's like, because he's failed, he's won.
Yeah,
that kind of stuff.
for sure. For sure.
How do you think generational beliefs about masculinity and money show up in your work with male clients?
Racial masculinity. Um, I would find, hey, I'm on a call, kiddo. What's up? Sorry. Um, you know, generation beliefs. It the answer is not what I think you would expect. I tend to find, certainly with some of my most successful clients, that most of them are married. Most of them have established a very good communication pattern with their spouse and are on the same page about money, like table stakes. Like they are in agreement at least. One of them will admit they're a spender, the other one will admit they're a saver. Maybe both of them will admit that they're spenders, or they're both savers. Like at least they're honest about who they are and how they handle money with one another. Um, that to me is step one. Um, I think there's a lot of hot air blown about, like the man should handle all the money, or there's certain, beliefs of how people think that couples should do it. I've seen couples do it a number of ways that just works for them. I think a lot of trial and error and negotiation occurs. But if there's one commonality I think I've seen is that they at least are fully transparent with one another about what's happening with, because there are plenty of times where the woman is a moderating influence on maybe the man's more impulsive tendencies, or the opposite. The man is the moderating force on the woman's impulsive tendencies. So it generally becomes a very successful partnership. I would almost equate it to the board of directors of a corporation, right? Like a household corporation. The house itself is a business, it's earning money, and you have the guiding officers, right, of the male and the female spouse who honestly collaborate, are upfront about their wishes, goals, and desires. And that way they can collaboratively create a plan to reach those things, a strategic vision. Did I mention I'm a financial planner? They can create a common set of goals and begin to build their way towards that. And I think there's a lot of traits that bless masculinity with, or that there's a lot of traits that masculinity blesses upon that partnership, in terms of, being willing to take risk where appropriate, being aggressive about saving or systematically earning money and allocating it to the right ways, creating focus towards singular goals. There's a lot of these are, oftentimes ascribed to masculinity and that focus and that drive. So I think having it well calculated and, having a sounding board, if your partner is, I think a real red flag of any relationship is if you and your partner are just on clearly two different wavelengths money wise. We all know the number one reason for divorce: money. Right. So if you guys can't get on the same, page about either saving money or what you want to spend your money on, you might want to find someone else who's a little bit more on the same page. It's an interesting line of thinking that question inspires. So.
If you're listening and feeling the weight of financial loss after heartbreak, know this: you're not broken, you're in transition. This conversation is your invitation to reclaim your power financially and emotionally. Like, subscribe, and share this episode with a brother, a friend, or a father who needs to hear it. Let's continue.
Great idea.
So how do you help men shift from short-term survival mode to long-term legacy building?
I will answer that question after I share one of the topics that I've been burning to insert into the conversation. So I know I've shared this speech with you before Glenn, but let's see, there's a movie starring Guy Pearce and Jim Caviezel called The Count of Monte Cristo. And there's a scene where what's his name? He's the guy who plays Superman, handsome fella. He plays Albert Mondego. And when you are, I'm speaking to the guy who's at the bottom of rock bottom and just now trying to piece together the financial recovery, the emotional recovery, trying to piece together what are they going to even do, to reclaim who they are. And I would highly recommend, in addition, reading that book once you get your business and, your million dollar business idea formed. I would also encourage you to watch the 2002 film, The Count of Monte Cristo, because there is a speech where Jim Caviezel's character stands up to give the birthday toast to Albert Mondego. And he first recounts Albert's courage in the catacombs of Rome, where he's kidnapped by gangsters and they force to cut off his finger and send it to his parents as proof of his abduction in exchange.
Yeah.
For ransom.
Yeah, real quick. It was Henry Cavill, I think.
You.
And
Yes.
he was he represented, his character was a young, I think, 16-year-old in the movie.
Yes. Thank you for the context and the reminder. Henry
Cavill.
Awesome.
Cavill, yeah.
So, Jim Caviezel prefaces with this and, the courage that, he tells the assembled dinner patrons, he says, the boys' reply to this threat was, do your worst. And of course, everybody's clapping and slapping him on the back. That level of courage by a young 16-year-old man is to be encouraged, obviously. Like, great job. And he continues, serious as a heart attack. He says, life is a storm, my young friend. You'll be basking in the sunlight one moment and scattered on the rocks the next. And what makes you a man is what you do when that storm comes. You must look into that storm as you did in Rome and say, do your worst, for I will do mine. And then the fates will know you as we know you, as Albert Mondego, the man. And of course, round of applause. Oh my gosh, it's the ideal birthday speech. But it is one of the better speeches I've ever heard because it spoke to me very deeply, where I said, geez, things will be going great one minute, and then it's all going to come crashing down, and there's nothing you can do about it besides making the decision to move on and begin to rebuild. So to me, that's a good preface to that question. How would you, shift from short-term survival mode to long-term legacy building? And the answer is, pardon me, I believe that happens organically. I really do. Once you get the short-term, step-by-step survival recovery mode, because that's all you can manage. I mean, you can sometimes barely manage that. If you can work on just making the bed, just getting cleaned up, presenting a presentable version of yourself to the world that day, and coming home in one piece and fixing yourself a nutritious meal and returning to a bed well made, that's day one. And then the next day, maybe you're going to clean up the living room too, or maybe you're going to at least write down 3 ideas for that business that you want to start, or that new industry you're trying to break into, or make a list of 3 names of colleagues or former colleagues or friends that might be able to help you with that. Right. Or just make a phone call to someone you trust to, emote, vent just a little bit. You're going to gradually build up on that day-to-day short-term survival mode, because my dad had always told me in my darkest of hours, son, time heals all wounds. just keep pushing through, and he was a Vietnam vet. So if there's anybody who can, attest personally, it's him. And that, continues to come to me this day, those words continue to inspire me to this day, because I go, yeah, it is going to be bad, but the hurt can't last forever. I know it physically can't. So if I can just do and credit to my mom on this one, she would tell me she worked commissioned retail sales
Oof.
for her entire career.
Oof.
Any of you out there who have worked retail, it's not easy dealing with the public. And she would say, all I do is I go to work, I do the very best I can do that day, and I leave it there. Like that's just, to me, is beautiful in its basicness. You're not trying to control things that you can't control. So I don't mean to speak in, ongoing generalities, but sometimes a general framework is the best place to start when you're starting from square one. Just controlling what you have the bandwidth to control that day and try to do just 1% better the day after that. So that would be my diatribe on that particular question.
Kind of leads into my next question. How do you help clients navigate financial decisions when emotions are still raw? I really like you have already provided some suggestions for financial tools or strategies, but when those emotions are really raw still, how do you help those clients navigate through those financial decisions?
Yeah, normally I would say try to avoid them if the emotions are still raw, right? Like, because our brain has a certain amount of bandwidth, and if we're focused on healing and repairing emotions, that leaves, I think, less rational thought available for big financial decisions. But I think sometimes we're thrust into both, right? We're working on healing, and now these decisions are thrust upon us. So how to navigate them? I personally think what is going to leave you as a result of this decision, what's going to leave you the most maneuverability to pursue your long-term strategic goal for your life or your strategic vision, right? I think if it inhibits your ability to pursue what it is that is meaningful to you, I think that's probably not the best decision. It's never that cut and dry, right? There's always complicating factors. Like if you decide to, if you're going to go on record with your soon-to-be ex-spouse saying, hey, you are going to start this business startup, and she petitions the judge that, that's not a stable enough home life for our kids. He only deserves partial or a 30 or 20% custody because he's going to claim he's going to be working so much. It's a nuanced situation to be in. That's damn hard. And I won't claim to have the exact right answer to any of that. But if I have the ability to at least rebuild my own life to where then I can be a better provider for a future spouse and certainly my young kids, I want to allow myself that maneuverability to become that, because it's not about me. It's about my progeny, my offspring, right? I want to give them everything that I didn't have, or at least every advantage that I am able to. So if something's going to restrict my movements or my ability to frankly bring in money or provide opportunity to my kids, I will use that as a guiding light. I think there certainly are exceptions, right? It's everybody's different, but if you're forced to undertake these financial decisions and you're still in an emotional state, for the love of God, don't do it alone. To have a trusted friend, family member, colleague, someone whose opinions you respect, right? Ideally, someone who fits the model of a life that you yourself are trying to build. I would try to get their input on the situation whenever possible. But do it with a brain trust, right? A group of people whose opinions you have confidence in, because as you yourself, Glenn, have said, nobody does it alone.
Shouldn't. It's not advisable.
Yeah. Certainly shouldn't do it alone. So
how important is emotional intelligence in financial planning?
Is that a serious question? I would say it is paramount. A lot of people think my job is just dollars and cents and spreadsheets and stock charts, but I'm typically, or I have been in the past, part of the interviewing committee, if you will, for junior advisor associates who want to come on board and say, I want to be a financial advisor. And the bucket of cold water I figuratively dump on their daydreams of what my job is. It's their job, it's their daydream to spend it looking at stock charts and evaluating spreadsheets and putting together portfolios that are just so perfect. I tell them, man, that's maybe 5% of my day on a heavy day, right? 95, 99% of my day is talking to people. And this is just going to sound so funny. I'm very much a people person. I love people. I'm interested in people. I think everybody's stories give me something to learn. So it's selfish in a lot of ways, but it's selfless, I find more often than not, because people are starved for connection in this day and age. A lot of times people say, are you nervous like AI or robo advisors are going to take your job? Nope. No, I'm not. Maybe for some lesser complicated planning cases, AI will replace me. But I can tell you with a high degree of certainty, the people that can identify with, average life experiences, whether that be, fights within the family or, making a stupid purchase or putting yourself on a limb, pursuing a dream and a business idea that you've always believed in, but are now just finally about to do it. We're all people and we all crave human connection. And that's the part about my job that I absolutely love so much, is because I get to interact with people and I find out, oh my God, like they like something that I really like. And then I get to explore that passion or that interest so much more deeply. And my clients quickly become my best friends. Like that, like I would say the great majority of the time, if I'm hanging out on a social occasion on the weekend, there's at least one client there, typically. And that's my dream, right? My work is my play. I'm living the dream. I still cannot believe how lucky I am to this day. But the point is that as I completely lose my train of thought, I was going down too many rabbit holes. The
Emotional intelligence.
Thank you. Yes. When you establish that emotional connection personally, and a client realizes, wow, this is someone I can identify with, someone I have something in common with. He's a real person. He's not just trying to sell me something or trying to pull a fast one on me. When they can really feel like they've got a thumb on the pulse of who you are as a human being, and you've really earned their trust, well, now you have the ability to do the most amount of good, because they're going to face a difficult financial situation, either immediately in your guys' partnership or later down the line. And when the stakes are high, I know that I'm going to offer the good advice at the end of the day. And if they trust me, they'll probably follow it. And then I know that the outcomes are going to be good in the long term, sometimes the short term, but the timelines are the big unknown. But I know that what they're doing is in their absolute best interest. And then I get to watch the happiness unfold over the years. Oh my God, you were right. Oh, thank God I didn't do this. And I did this like you recommended instead. Oh, like it's something I experience every day. And I also bear witness to the opposite, where I'll either be in competitive situations with advisors that maybe didn't care as much, because if that is my biggest weakness, my wife has said this to me. She used to work at my firm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And she said, if there is one thing that I notice, it's that you really do care, because there are advisors out there that don't. And it's very obvious. And to me, therein lies the power, right? When you have the power to genuinely build trust and enjoy the process, because you're essentially just making best friends the whole time. Mm-hmm. you have the power to do so much good. You're opening up a very deep can in how much and how important emotional intelligence is in financial planning, because certainly there's that whole concept of establishing trust and being a friend and so forth, but you also do need to have the same thumb on the pulse of someone's humanity. You need to have it for them just like they have it on you, because if you can be intelligent enough, have enough emotional intelligence to gauge where they are at, it's going to tailor your approach in delivering the guidance, right?
Sure.
Because you can give someone point blank advice, and if it's not packaged correctly, or if it's not at a moment when they're ready to hear it, it's not going to be followed, right? And I've watched advisors and colleagues that don't have emotional intelligence that deliver that advice, and lo and behold, it's not followed. And I don't get it. It was clear as all these spreadsheet numbers. I walked them through this whole spreadsheet, and they didn't listen to all the figures on the spreadsheet. Well, they don't give a shit. They don't want to hear it delivered in that way. You need to be more aware on the proper way to deliver the information so as they will be receptive to it. You can't control it all the time, but having emotion, having EQ, as I would call it, emotional intelligence, is at least going to make you a more adept advisor and help your clients or partners be more prone to follow what you're suggesting. So, emotional intelligence in my line of work is absolutely paramount, man. The funny story is, I still remember my final interview at this particular firm, and it was with like the West Coast, VP of manager. He was like multiple levels above me, and this guy was a hard ass. He was your classic, alpha Wall Street guy.
Right.
And I can still recall my honest assessment of the job. And he told me years later, he's like, when you said this, that was what got you the job. And I said to him in the interview, I said, I get it. I get, this is a sales job. My job as a financial advisor is a sales job. You want me to go out, earn people's trust, have them bring their money to the firm, and lead them to good outcomes. That's what you want. And he was like, when can you start? Like he was like, in that moment, I realized like you got it. A lot of people don't get it. Some people get hired on and then don't get it until later. That your job is to sell people into doing what is truly right for themselves, because it's not always cut and dry, especially in the wealth management world of managing portfolios and managing personal wealth. It's really confusing. Hence that I have a full-time job to learn a lot of this stuff. So it's probably more answer than you bargained for, but that's a topic close to my heart.
Well, you bring up a really good point about building trust with your client. You understand where they're coming from, you listen to them, and you make the decisions for them as what you think it would be best, not what is best for you.
I would correct that verbiage in that I don't make any decisions for someone. I present to them my recommendations and they make the decisions, just so we're clear. Right. But I would say, yeah, because just as like in the corporation of the Glen Gilbert podcast listener, every listener to this podcast is their own little corporation, the CEO of their own little world. My bet is they probably act as their own CFO too. They manage all the finances of their own little corporation. And a lot of times people, as they become successful throughout their lives, the CFO's lane, the financial responsibilities of that corporation get pretty complex, enough to the point where someone either doesn't have the knowledge, doesn't have the interest, or they don't have the time. You got to have all three of those things in plentiful supply. But if you can't give the time, the knowledge, or the interest to adequately manage that lane of your corporation, that's when I would recommend you consider interviewing folks that might be able to help with that, because it's a pretty important lane. it's a pretty important part of your corporation. You want that to be locked up, I think, dialed down pretty tight so you're not checking back in on that department in a couple of months going, what the hell happened? Like, who's been, has this been completely neglected for, however long? It's more common than you think.
Right. Yeah. Okay. I will stand corrected as far as you provide options and let them decide, let your client decide.
Right. That's that'll keep the attorneys happy at least.
So Joy, we covered a lot. Purpose, accountability, perseverance. Anything else you'd like to add? Any final thoughts that you would like to add?
Strategic vision. Like do the hard work, the hard thinking. I beat that drum time and again. I had a book passed to me. It's literally talking away from my microphone, but it's sitting over my shoulder on my bookshelf called The Power of Focus. And it was, one of the original issues of that book way back in the day. I want to say I was maybe a freshman, sophomore in high school. And I was blessed with a longer term perspective, right? I kind of had an idea, like I want to grow up and make money and have a family. I think that was about as long term as I got. But that book helped me write down my goal a year from now, a goal 3 years from now, a goal 5 years from now, and added some structure to that long-term thinking. It's my yet another quote that that occurs to me often is, if you fail to plan, then you plan to fail. I'm sure you've heard it before. A lot of us have. Winging it is fine when you're in your 20s. But when you get to the end of your 20s, or if you're in your 30s, how much more do we want to wing this? Would we like to start setting some goals, some wickets, some, time frames we'd like to have certain things accomplished in? You got to grow up. Eventually we got to be an adult. We need to make adult decisions. We got to not have so many cocktails on a Saturday night before a podcast. We need to make sure that we're doing the hard work of staying in shape, not eating McDonald's every single day, assuming that finances are not a constriction there. Doing the stuff that an adult would do, doing the stuff that a man would do that would make him attractive to a new potential mate, doing something that a man would do that his son or his daughter would look up to their dad and go, wow, he doesn't do everything right, but he's got that right. Showing what right looks like. That's one of my favorite phrases I pulled from my Marine Corps experience. One of the biggest compliments was to be told, hey, you're showing what right looks like. You're the example that the leadership is pointing to, the Lance Corporal Schmuckatellis that need an example, right? Like I need to be more like that guy.
Right.
This is more than just one final thought, but, if you can sit down, give some conscious thought to what your strategic vision is, even a year from now, it might get your creative juices flowing and light your fire just a little brighter to start pursuing that, especially if you write it down on paper, and especially if you share it with a trusted confidant, ideally who maybe mirrors some of the goals, the achieved goals that you yourself would like to accomplish someday. You're setting up the infrastructure, right, to get you further up the ladder towards what it is you do want your life to look like. And we all suffer setbacks. If you're at rock bottom, I've been there. I don't go into as much detail about that on the Glen Gilbert Connection, but we've all experienced a rock bottom. And I think what makes you a man is what you do when that storm comes. So I think that's my final thought.
Yeah. Find a purpose, it sounds like.
Yeah. Find your why.
Find your why. Yeah.
Well said.
Jordan reminded us today that rebuilding wealth isn't just about numbers, it's about narrative. It's the story you tell yourself about who you are, what you've lost, and what you're still capable of creating. So if you're standing in the rubble, take heart. The foundation of your legacy might be right beneath your feet. Thank you for tuning into the Glen Gilbert Connection. Like, subscribe, share with others, and keep healing, keep growing, and keep showing up for yourself and for those who you love. Until next time, stay connected. Jordan, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. These are always fun.